Hey, spooky people, it's your best friend Kenny here, and we are back with another video in the Galina Trefil investigation. We are continuing to go through her Facebook posts and look at the evidence that she has provided that her father is a serial killer. She has claimed that her father is the Zodiac Killer, is responsible for the Santa Rosa hitchhiker murders, and has killed hundreds of people in the last few decades. It's also important to know that her father currently is in the throes of Alzheimer's disease and is bedridden in a hospital. She claims she's gone to authorities. Authorities have issued statements that have stated that they do not believe that John Trefil is a serial killer or that there is any credence behind her claims. So she has gone to Facebook and she is posting her information on Facebook and other social media websites claiming that this is evidence that her father is a serial killer. This is the fourth video in my investigation. Let's get spooky. Hey, spooky people. Please make sure you're subscribed to this channel, The Spooky Lawyer. Please make sure that you like and share this video. And without any more, let's get to it. On March 18th, Galina will write, "My name is Galina. I am the daughter of a serial killer. Many victims that escaped my father were tortured in Ukiah, California. These survivors would not be aware that they were victimized by such a predator." I mean, they were aware that they were victimized by a predator, that's for sure, right? John Trefil was extremely intelligent, targeted multiple victim types, and he knew which groups of people wouldn't be listened to if they came forward. Around 1980 to 1982, give or take, John worked at the Ukiah hospital. According to him, when he worked in the ER, he tortured just under a dozen patients that came in with emergency injuries. These were people in terrible physical agony seeking medical aid. His personal kick was to deny them anesthetic when he knew they needed it and were entitled to it. They writhed, they cried, he watched. I believed he said that he denied anesthetic during basic operations like stitches, but it's been so long. I can't swear to that. So he's a psychiatrist, and I know he's also a surgeon, so I don't know how exactly that sort of plays out. And also suggesting that this is torture, I don't know, this is pretty hard to prove whether they were not given the appropriate amount of anesthetic. And of course, there's nothing here that he did this. There's no report saying that this happened. There's no recordings or nothing from him saying that he did this. So we just sort of have to take Galina at her word here if you want to. My mother confirmed the story of his because she remembered him telling her that he was doing this. So this is sort of hearsay on hearsay, right? She did not report him at the time it was happening, so more people were victimized. I do not know if he was ever in a position to inflict this method of cruelty when he worked at the Fort Bragg hospital. I only know while working there was a point that he was the chairman for the hospital well-being committee. He knew all the dirt on which doctors had drug and alcohol problems, which ones were coming to work under the influence. Oh boy. According to him, several local doctors were doing this. As chairman, John's job was to ensure the doctors got help with their addictions. I can't state enough, if John Trefil goes down, he won't do it quietly. He was a prominent psychiatrist in Mendocino County for 20 years. He was an expert witness for the DA's office in predator cases. He lectured law enforcement about capturing predators. He was involved in a removed fashion with the Children of God cult. He knows secrets about very influential people. I'm not going to say that's why nothing has happened in terms of his prosecution. I can't imagine him knowing and stockpiling their data has helped though. Below I enclose a photograph of him around the period where patients were being tortured. And it's a photograph of him and he has a nice mustache. June 18th, she will post again. My name is Galina. I am the daughter of a serial killer. No, I won't stop saying that. I say it because I will not back down until he's been properly investigated. And that's sort of a slippery slope here because the proper investigation, what does that even mean at this point? You know, when will she be satisfied? When has there been a proper investigation? And the answer is she has a belief of how he should be investigated. And until that happens, she won't be satisfied. So it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy here. You know, she can constantly say that even though this guy has been investigated and determined that there's not enough evidence to support her claims, that's not enough investigation. There's a body of water in Albion, California, wherein my father claimed to have submerged the body parts of multiple young women in containers. They've been submerged for approximately 30 years at this point, so I honestly don't know what would still be left. Well, if they were in containers, there would still be remnants, human remains in those containers, right? Regardless, I know for a fact that this spot has not been drained by the Mendocino County Sheriff's Department. Water cadaver dogs have not been brought to search it. Divers have not checked it out. These are cold, hard facts. The DA's office knows about John's pond confessions, the very specific spots where he says the girls are. There is no quit until these crime scenes are searched. I will not stop because someone claims they were when I know it's not true. I challenge any person in authority to supply proof to the public that this body of water has been searched in the above mentioned ways. Well, she kind of has to provide proof that there's a reason to search this in the above mentioned ways, and she hasn't really provided it yet. It's not like law enforcement here is not wanting to find, a mass murderer. And in fact, I would suggest they probably would be very happy to find someone who's responsible for all these deaths. So, and I also don't know whether cadaver water dogs and draining these waters is the proper way of searching this. I don't know about divers either. I mean, I'm sure there have been a lot of divers searching these areas over the years, and there's been nothing found. So here she's posted a YouTube video, and it's a recording dated September 26, 2015, Confession Part 1. It says Part 1 of 4. My name is Galina. I'm the daughter of a serial killer. I sent this recording to the Sonoma County Sheriff's Department almost a decade ago. When John first started talking about his murders, he only discussed his male victims. To my recollection, this was the first day he really talked about females. After delivering it to law enforcement, I was told by the Assistant Sheriff Jason Fowler that John was inaudible. This was the reason given that it was not followed up on. Fowler refused to take custody of John's strychnine vial. He did promise in roughly 2020 and 2021 that he would interview John when the COVID pandemic was over. It never happened. Once John felt comfortable enough, felt that he wouldn't be judged harshly, he opened up that his real body count was astronomically higher. We're going to look into these videos.
I can't hear you. Can you speak up?
Time if you put him in the afternoon, when it's warm out.
So it's better to burn a body when it's warm out? I can't hear you. I'm going to lean in closer. So, the ones that were hitchhiker cases that you killed, how did you kill them? With the chemical, not with the pipe? You killed the hitchhikers in different ways? So you were experimental with the hitchhikers?
March 18th, she writes again, I'm Galina, I'm the daughter of a serial killer, and I need your help. In 1969, my mother, Candy, was on the road to getting famous in the Bay Area. Then she quit suddenly. She's never given much explanation why, but she completely went off the public radar. She moved to the Navajo reservation near Flagstaff and stayed there for most of 7 years. As a little girl, I remember her telling me that she opened her front door one morning and found a human skull on her doorstep. My mother has always had a morbid fascination with death. She did not report this to law enforcement. She claimed that a friend gave her other skulls in the future, presumably stolen from abandoned Hogans on the res. That's her story anyway. The first day that I introduced my father to Athena Bolton, who now works at the DA's office, my mother was there. Though Athena was a complete stranger to her, Candy began enthusiastically speaking to her about her collection of human skulls. I believe that the number of skulls she claimed to have in her possession was 4. She laughed to Athena that she had, back in the 1980s, placed a woman's skull in the Mendocino free box outside the health food store. My mother was a massive free box fan in those days and routinely took and deposited things there. Candy found it very mirthful that the police were called to investigate the head. After depositing the head, she said that she drove to work. At that time, I think that she was a kindergarten teacher at Redwood Elementary. So this is a pretty wild story about her mother, not her father. I'm asking for those that were my mother's students to rack their brains here. Do you remember this? When Candy was a teacher at Dana Gray Elementary, I many times saw, and so did hundreds of others, that she had a human skull in her classroom. He had no name, so I called him Otis. There have been numerous stories about where Otis comes from, but none are consistent. My mother enjoyed refreshing Otis, that is, putting clay onto the skull to recreate his features when alive. When I was growing up, one of the many reasons that he didn't dare come forward was because, well, this was a 4th grade teacher keeping a human skull in plain sight. The teachers knew, the students knew. She played it off as perfectly natural that she had it, and I know that there are places to legally obtain body parts, but still, this was a human skull in plain sight and no one did anything. I knew that if I created a big problem about it, I might wind up being sent to live in the tomb, so I had just learned to live with it. In the classroom, live with it. Live with Otis sitting inches from where my mother did her makeup every morning. The DA's office obviously knows about the skull collection. I say again, why is nothing happening? Well, she said earlier, there are legal ways to obtain human skeletons and human body parts, and especially back then, at this time period, this would have been what, the 80s? I'm sure it was a lot easier to get human skulls for teachers. And also, who knows if it's even a real human skull at this point, right? She might have just said it was a real human skull. Worst case scenario, these are murder victims. Best case scenario, there are indigenous remains that have been disrespected to an unfathomable degree. This is not okay. Below, I include a picture of myself in the 3rd grade with a plastic skull, which I had refreshed under my mother's tutelage. She refreshed Otis in the same way. My mother had hundreds of students over the years. Someone has to remember seeing something similar in her classroom. And, there's a million comments. There's 224 comments to this post, but I see some people saying, I remember the skull. But you also don't know if these comments are just people trolling. Anyway, I sort of question about whether to even include that part in this video, but I think that sort of describes her mindset pretty well, that she seems pretty apt to make these accusations about anybody, including her mother. So I don't know. Like I said, I'm becoming less and less convinced by this as I go through this. It seems like she has a lot of issues with the way that she was brought up, and she seems like she really wants to blame her parents and really wants to take both of her parents down with this kind of stuff. So she has a post here saying her internet was down, trying to get back to responding to people. And then on March 21st, she writes, "My name is Galina. I'm the daughter of John Trefil, a serial killer. My father was very vocal that he knew the identities of and covered for 2 other at-loose serial killers. One of them was Michael Fries." We've talked about Michael Fries. John met Mike Fries in 1963 in the Illinois State Psychiatric Institute. Fries was a mental patient there. John voluntarily committed himself and lived as a patient at the asylum for approximately 8 months. Being a voluntary commit, John had the ability to sign himself in and out of the asylum, and according to him, he did this on an almost daily basis. You think there would be some sort of paper trail for that, but I don't see one. During his stay at the ISPI, John deep dived into his inner psyche. Such introspection was a cherished hobby of his. Mine too. He also took drugs, including truth serum, to recover memories. It became his belief that he had been subjected to torture by a handful of his relatives. Sounds familiar. One particular recover memory he had from a therapy session at ISPI resulted in him murdering his grandmother, Jenny Rezek, on July 5th, 1963. John would later acknowledge verbally in 2015 and in his diaries that he had no actual memories of the abuse happening. And again, this narrative is just sort of stream of consciousness, so we've not seen any proof that he murdered his grandmother. She's claimed that John murdered his grandmother. We've seen no evidence of that whatsoever. There were scars on John's back, which he would point to in order to elicit sympathy from women he was dating. These were the proof of his childhood torture. In reality, these scars were left by a young girl one evening when John was drunk. No further information about that, but John showed the bloody mess to his mother. He, however, told people, myself included, that he'd been whipped by a cat of 9 tails recovered from the Buchenwald concentration camp. 2 years before murdering Jenny, John had already killed her husband, his grandfather, Carol. John was embarrassment that Carol did not speak good English and considered him generally ignorant. That's why he killed him. Jenny and Carol were both poisoned. Given their advanced age, both murders slipped completely under the radar. She's made this allegation in previous posts. John has never said why Fries was in the mental asylum. He only has said that Fries had a strong hatred of women. Fries left Illinois and moved to the Bay Area, specifically Berkeley, California. You know what they say about Berkeley, California and weirdos, right? Just kidding. I actually wanted to go to Berkeley when I was in high school, but I didn't. John periodically made trips to the Bay Area throughout the mid-1960s until he moved there for good. Fries was one of the individuals that he would stay with when he didn't have a room rented somewhere. John's way of describing his friendship with Fries was Leopold seeking Loeb. I'm guessing that's a Bible reference. You can explain to me in the comments what that means. My mother once told me that Fries was incredibly slimy. I think the exact quote was, upon meeting him, it was like shaking hands with a banana slug. And as an attorney, I've shook hands with people who I would describe as slugs. On October 24th, either 1970 or 1971, written with both years in his diary, John was on a date with a girl and discovered himself to be impotent. He was so humiliated by his inability to perform that he decided to test run Fries as a serial killer. Fries, to this point, had never killed anyone before. John considered himself the dominant personality in the relationship. Someone's got to be the dom. John and Fries made a pact. They selected victims for each other with the promise to SA and kill the woman that had been selected. According to John, he did not attack the woman that Fries had selected. Fries, on the other hand, went through with it. The story which John told myself, my mother, and probably a lot of other people for decades was that the woman, M. Doe, opened her door to find Fries when he knocked. John's story was that M was repeatedly assaulted, bound, and tortured, but she was not killed. She survived, escaped somehow, and M. Doe pressed charges. Yes, this incident has an actual police report to go with the story. I don't know how accurate John's details above are, but it shouldn't be too difficult for the Berkeley PD to find out. Also, probably shouldn't be too difficult to obtain this police report for other people either. John panicked. If Michael Fries was in the hot seat, he might as well rat John out. John showed up on M. Doe's doorstep, and using his status as a medical student or doctor, he persuaded her to drop the charges. He talked about Fries' history in the asylum, gave a sob story about him being unable to control his actions, and promised that he would make sure that Fries got future psychiatric help. And that's not how this works. Once something like this, especially like an attempted murder, is reported, a district attorney's office gets to decide whether or not to go through with the charges. So there would still be a record of this. She can't just say, hey, DA, drop the charges, and they'll drop the charges. John described M as short, brunette, and curvy. She either worked in or was studying some kind of medical field. She was from Illinois, like him. John has confessed to killing multiple teenage hitchhikers in the 1970s Sonoma County. He's confessed to being the Zodiac Killer. According to John's story, Fries was present for some of the Sonoma cases. Fries was also present for some of the Competency murders. Fries was not present for anything regarding Zodiac, but he was aware of John's involvement and may have mailed some of the letters. According to John, Fries was an infinitely more sadistic killer than he himself was. He described watching Fries essay girls. One particular essay that he watched took place in the 1970s at a large outdoor nighttime college party in Roanoke Park. Whether or not the girl being essayed was released afterwards or taken prisoner, I don't think that he said. One woman that knew John very well in the 1970s stated that she remembered Fries. John told her when he was drunk that the two of them had broken into a woman's apartment when she was sleeping. They bound her and gagged her, John said, but never finished the story. This woman figured that John was just drunk, that the story couldn't possibly be true. Not a great drunk story to be telling someone. Here we are today, 40 years later, after John told someone that story. I met Fries once as a little girl. I begged my father not to introduce him to me. Fries and John had periodic falling outs. My mother was afraid, as was I, that if Fries met me, I would be essayed. John met up with Fries in the Fort Bragg Safeway parking lot. He promised me that Fries didn't have to see me. Nevertheless, a few minutes later, he walked up to the truck, pulled the door open, and showed me off. Fries was slender. I believe that he had light curly hair, but I couldn't swear to that. John said that he attended a lower class high school. John was huge on talking about upper and lower class in Illinois. I think that Rose was in the title. Fries lived in Europe for a while. I do not remember which country. Fries is a ghost online. I do not know whether or not he is actually dead. He was roughly the same age as my father. Fries later demanded that John write a letter for him identifying him as legally disabled. This took place in Fort Bragg, California. John did so. To the best of John's knowledge, Michael Fries never identified John publicly as a serial killer. They kept each other's secret. John, on the other hand, told the story of M to a lot of people. I knew about M probably since I was 4 years old. To my mother, if you're reading this, I say, please do the right thing. In 2015, when I told you that John identified 2 other serial killers, you didn't hesitate for 2 seconds to say that Fries was going to be the other one. Do the right thing. To M, if this post finds you, if you are still alive to read this, be aware that I will never identify your first name without your permission. I can't imagine what hell you've lived through all these years. Know this, though, it was not too late for justice. You are one of the few to survive, which makes you one of the few that can actually bring these serial killers down. My father is bedridden. He can't hurt you. If you do come forward, I can only assume that there are a lot of people, good people, caring people who will support you. That might have been the opposite of true 50 years ago, but it is true now. Thank you for your bravery. May you have peace. More stories about these characters in this case. We already heard about Michael Fries, so this is more to the Michael Fries lore, but I don't know. I mean, there's no evidence supporting anything here. On March 21st, she writes, my name is Galina. I'm the daughter of a serial killer. John Trefil stated repeatedly verbally that he did not essay his victims. He acknowledged photographing them with a Polaroid camera and burying the photographs in Albion. Below, I will attach a few more pages from the 1970s and 1980s diaries. And then she's posted a few of these pictures. scans of handwriting. Again, there's no context to any of this, so it's impossible to know, but it says, I know even if no one else does, I believe it that I solely am responsible. A brutally prolonged essay 12 years ago. The only thing in my life that I have to feel guilty about, fortunately for me, I don't think about it daily. And then there's a this looks like typed notes, and they're cut off and they're cropped. The peyote freak out not as symbolic, but as the re-experience of an early traumatic experience I have never been able to remember. I have written about it, but it was and remains the most vivid, real, profound, important, meaningful experience of my life. Not only is my life so closely related to death threat, but the impression of feeling and closely related to death threat by strangulation or burning alive. Again, the problem is a lot of this stuff seems to be just sort of scribbled notes, and it's impossible to know whether any of this is his actual diaries or whether these are clinical notes. And I would say if these are clinical notes, and the typed up one, there's a typed up one that looks very much like clinical notes from a patient, so I'm not going to read that one. March 22nd, she has a post. This is a direct message to law enforcement. John Trefil's GED match DNA number is M160615. March 22nd, she writes, several people asked, so I will address this question. No, the page wherein my father discusses the essay he's responsible for is not psychiatric session notes for someone else. Well, how could she know that? Obviously she sort of read the minds of doubt here, but how could she know who those notes are referring to? John did not mix his patient records with his diaries, with the exception of that patient accusing him of a crime. I'm rather aghast at the notion that a man can literally write down that he's responsible for essay and someone's reaction is to defend him. But the problem is it's not a confession, and it's not worded like a confession. I understand I haven't published everything regarding him and S crimes yet, but I also feel, wow, what does a R SAer have to do? A neon sign, a loudspeaker? He acknowledged himself as an SAer in print, but the problem is he didn't. He just said he feels responsible, and we don't even know if he's referring to himself or he's writing as someone else. This is sort of a tactic to take the criticism and attack the criticizer for saying, how dare you support this person, when what people are doing is they're saying, this really isn't evidence of what you're saying. And so she's then saying, how dare you support this person? Then writes, to date, I've only blocked one person, going to start blocking more. This is ridiculous behavior. Be skeptical all you want that he's a serial killer. He is calling himself an SAer though. There's no defending it. There's no what if. He's saying it. He wrote it down as a keepsake. March 22nd, she posts, my name is Galina. I am the daughter of John Trefil, pictured below, a serial killer. I was recently told that I don't have the ethical right to state the names of my father's victims publicly unless I can provide solid proof that he killed them. I understand the argument. It is certainly the last thing that I wish to do to cause any families any further emotional distress. Well, yeah, I mean, you have an ethical duty to tell the truth, right? And you have an ethical duty to support whatever you're saying. And it seems like what you're saying here is you're reaching for something here, but you're not providing any direct evidence of anything. I would like to emphasize again that this is my father's story, not mine. I am only relaying it to the public after almost a decade of law enforcement refusing to question him about his allegations. There are two victims from Fort Bragg, California that I will talk about today, though, whose identities as his victims would probably never be known if I didn't go public with the information: Paul Doe and Charlie Doe. As John was usually working on some building project, he was frequently a shopper at Rossi's, a massive local hardware store. In the 1980s, he was in Rossi's when he spotted a man. I call that man Charlie Doe. Okay, so the name Charlie Doe comes from Galina. It's not an official designation. John didn't know him, but he said that effectively from the moment that he set eyes on Charlie, he knew that he wanted to kill him. Again, when did he say this? There was no explanation or physical description of Charlie. John watched him throughout the store and followed him outside. He saw that Charlie had a truck for sale with a sign in the window and a phone number and a price. He used this to stalk Charlie. He called him up, and when Charlie allowed him to come over and inspect the truck, John stated that he bludgeoned Charlie with a metal pipe. John kept a half dozen metal pipes underneath the seat of his white Silverado truck. Bludgeoning was his favorite kill method. He claimed he always discarded the pipe immediately after he used it in order to dispose of evidence. John was horrified to later discover that Charlie survived the attack but was concussed to the point that he could not remember what happened to him. Convenient. Whether John killed Charlie at a later date was not clear from this from his confessions. Paul Doe was a Fort Bragg patient of John's, either in 1980s or 1990s. Paul was his actual name, though no last name was given. John always claimed that he did not kill his own patients, but rather those of other doctors. Stories like Paul emphasize that this was not the case. At some point during therapy, Paul said something about Paul's daughter, which John did not like. John didn't say what it was, but it was this statement which made John decide to kill Paul. He prescribed him something, he did not say what, which he knew would result in death. He said that Paul's death was ruled an overdose. Though Paul was John's patient in Fort Bragg, it was unclear if he actually died in Fort Bragg or not. Charlie Doe and Paul Doe deserve to be identified. Respect to the dead, justice for them and their family. March 22nd, she writes, "It is absolutely anyone's right to call for me being arrested. Enjoy your free speech. I will absolutely block you if you call for arrest on my page." I don't know why anyone would call for her to be arrested, because I don't think she's doing anything arrest, but I haven't gone through the hundreds and hundreds of comments, and I won't. March 22nd, she writes again, "A lot hinges on John Trefil's competency, and understandably so here's some basic data shared by his former power of attorney. A Fort Bragg neurologist, Dr. Peter Glusker, wrote in 2015 that John's Parkinson's was cured. Well, Parkinson's doesn't have a cure. Medical personnel in 2015 in Reno declared that he did not have Parkinson's at all. The nursing home where he is at had it in their paperwork as of around 6 months ago that John is competent to make his own medical decisions. Oh, you better believe that I have a copy of that record, which he asked staff to print for me. Law enforcement can feel free to verify that. So he's competent when it comes to making major decisions regarding his health, but he's incompetent when it comes to saying he murdered people. The math's not math. Yes, those are two different things. John gave me his blessing to speak to law enforcement and the media about his crimes. I don't know how he's processing the death threats I've heard he's received. I don't know how he would be receiving these death threats if he's in a hospital. That doesn't really make sense. He's clearly not on social media. I don't know if he's still willing to point to where the bodies are buried after the hell of the past 2 weeks. I do know that I had a plan to find out where more cemeteries are that I will continue to pray can come to fruition. He's physically frail. So long as he's not being sedated, he's mentally sharp." And then there's this photograph of him, and he does not look well. "He is a serial killer, and I will not be quiet." March 23rd, she posts, "My name is Galina. I am the daughter of a serial killer. There's a major aspect of this case that outsiders may not realize unless it is spelled out. Here goes. John Trefil carried out a great deal of his crimes inside the Emerald Triangle in Northern California. There are 3 counties that make up the Emerald Triangle: Mendocino, Humboldt, and Trinity. This area has famously specialized in drug production for well over half a century. Drugs are deeply embedded in the culture here as marrow is inside a living bone. There's absolutely no separation. There isn't just local knowledge. Across the United States, Emerald Triangle is a known name in the drug world. Albion, where John lived, even by Mendocino County standards, was a particularly notorious drug spot, particularly in the 1970s and 1980s. Even the cops were scared to go there because no one trespassed on other people's land out in the woods. People were afraid of what they might find if they did, because drug patches and homicidal drug dealers were such a common thing. Frankly, they still are. Mendocino County, on the surface, is a beautiful tourist spot that has been featured in many films like Overboard, Dying Young, The Majestic, and East of Eden. Underneath that pretty surface, though, that facade, people are very aware that there is a very thick crime current that has never been successfully prosecuted. Put to it, no one's even tried. Mendocino County was home to the following famous serial killers and murderers: Buck Walter, Charles Manson, Herbert Mullins, John Annabelle, Reverend Jim Jones, Kenneth Harnell, Leonard Lake, Susan Atkins, Leonard Sereno, and Trefog Johnson. It was home to the Jonestown cult, the Children of God cult, satanic cult worship, and a lot of other cults that only the local old-timers know the names of. Isn't it strange that an area so incredibly rural has such a long list of serial killers that came to make their nests here? Why did they come here? Why did the cults come here? And then she posts a bunch of photographs of famous murderers. So I guess the argument here is because this area is a bunch of serial killers, that is why John was able to get away with it. So we covered a lot of ground in this video, and we still have not seen a lot of evidence of anything. There are some disturbing writings, but it's unclear whether those writings are referring to things that he's claimed that he's done, or if they're patient notes, or if they're stories, or whatever. We've heard a lot of speculation from her, speculation about supposed victims, speculation about his mental state and his mental well-being and his health. But we've been in this investigation for a long time now. We've looked at and we've seen a lot of supposed evidence, and we've seen really nothing that is concrete that establishes that he is, in fact, a serial killer. We're going to cover some of the confession recordings that she's posted on YouTube. They're very long and very hard to understand and hard to go through of because, well, you'll understand when we go through them. But they're very difficult to listen to. So I'm struggling with how exactly to edit them in some sort of coherent manner. Regardless, make sure you're subscribed to this channel. Please like and share this video. Follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky. My username is The Spooky Lawyer. Follow me on TikTok. My username is AKBruise. If there is a different disturbing story you'd like me to cover, leave me a comment or send me an email. My email address is thespookylawyer@gmail.com. Let me know what you think about the evidence in this case so far. Like I said, it feels like there's a whole lot of stuff here and a whole lot of nothing really pointing to the fact that he is a serial killer. If you'd like to support the channel, there is a super thanks button. Please click it and make a donation. Any donation you make to this channel will go back into making good videos for this channel. I appreciate it. You also support me by liking, sharing, and watching my videos. And I really do appreciate that you watch my videos. And please stay spooky.